Hey, everybody.
Gentlemen, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Derek does the no warning start. I like it. It's a very exciting way to run this. Derek, could you hear us?
I can. I did warn you in the private chat
Did
here
you?
behind the scenes. So
Oh, I did.
yeah,
I
if
did.
you
That's
pay
the first
attention to
warning I
that
got.
sort of thing,
No, I don't pay attention to that
then
sort of
if
thing.
you pay attention to stuff like that, then you would be aware that we're starting. But
Yeah,
I
no, that's a really
digress.
good point, Derek. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I ever doubted you.
So stepping right into a quarrel here, it seems.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
trouble in
this is how we
paradise.
usually start. Yeah.
Yeah, my kid has been screaming all night, so I'm ready for a fucking live stream. Let me tell you that. It's been a real goddamn
Nice.
pleasure. Derek, why don't you tell the fam
Well, speaking
what we're
of
up
screaming children, Luke, what's going on with Donald Trump and his temper tantrum with Canada? What can you tell us about what's happened this week? Luke, I think you're muted.
Yeah, Luke, you're muted. This live stream 101.
See, this is
Don't mute yourself.
I'll tell you what, man.
Is he frozen now? No. Okay, great.
Can you guys hear me okay? In fact, what I was saying before I realized I was muted was I think my mic has been unplugged. So before I answer your question, we better get that straight.
Oh.
Two of you hear me now?
All right then. Yeah.
Okay, you can hear me now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what we're dealing with, in the past week is the collapse of what's felt like these kind of eternal trade talks, rolling throughout the past year, just over a year. There had been some appearances in the last few days before the talks collapsed that there was going to be some kind of a deal. And, the Carney government had staked a fair bit since the election last year on the idea that it was going to get some kind of a deal with the United States. And, Carney was going to use his master negotiating skills and deal-making skills in order to do that. But the talks collapsed at the last minute, and Canada walked away from the table. The details are a little bit hazy on what exactly happened, but I have no reason to doubt the sort of broad contours of the Canadian government's own account, which is that the Trump administration and Howard Lutnick in particular, the Commerce Secretary, they had the kind of outlines of a deal, and then, the Trump administration, inserted a bunch of poison pills, inadvertently perhaps, essentially made a whole bunch of new demands at the last minute. That there was just no way the Canadian government was ever going to be able to accept. For example, it seems they wanted to limit Canada's ability to negotiate trade deals with other countries. They wanted to, Canada to give up, some of the leverage that it's had when it comes to counter tariffs and provincial bans on U.S. booze. American. I don't respectfully buy a lot of American alcohol myself, but it's been off the shelves throughout a lot of the country over the past 18 months or so.
How dare you, first of all?
Is White Claw American?
What else do we have to sell overseas but booze and guns, I guess?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And as I've learned, a lot of the beer that I thought was buying Canadian is just they're just Canadian subsidiaries of U.S. companies anyway. So you can't escape it. The talons of the American empire are simply everywhere. But yeah. So I could rattle down the list here of these last minute demands that the Trump administration made. Won't go through all of them, but one of them seems to have had to do with the abolition of requirements for promoting the French language on labeling and cultural subsidies of various kinds that the Canadian government makes when it comes to protecting French language content and Francophone culture, that sort of thing. So whether the Trump administration expected these things to be poison pills, or whether it took the Canadian government's relative willingness to make concessions to date as evidence that it could ask for more, I'm really not sure. But the bottom line is they Howard Lutnick attached all of these extra demands at the last minute. Canada walked away from the table, and I'll just add, I think in doing so, I think Trump kind of getting a whole bunch, then reaching for more, which has been something of a recurring pattern throughout the past 18 months, both in his dealings with Canada and I think elsewhere. I think that's probably saved Canadians a bad deal, because I think the Carney government was pretty much poised to accept a deal that was less favorable than the deal Trump originally, than CUSMA, which was the deal Trump originally walked away from when he started the trade war. I think they were prepared to accept it and declare victory. So I think Trump's idiocy has probably helped Canada dodge a bullet, at least for now.
This raises a question. I mean, we can talk more about Carney as the stream goes on, but what is his actual plan for dealing with the U.S., or does he not have one? Because on the one hand, he's giving these speeches about the U.S. isn't reliable anymore. Canada has to make a break. We can't depend on this relationship with a great power anymore. Indeed, all the middle powers of the world must unite and start pursuing their own interests and get off of their dependency on bigger players. And yet went along with all the Iran nonsense, goes along with pretty much everything, and here, as you say, was ready to swallow a turd sandwich, for lack of a better metaphor, until the Trump administration buffoonishly just started pushing this ridiculous stuff at the last minute. So what is he actually trying to do here? Is he kowtowing? Is he trying to stand Canada up on its own 2 feet? It seems incoherent.
It's a really interesting question, and I actually think it's somewhat complicated to answer. I mean, I'll say that if you ask most Canadians, say a year ago or just over a year ago when the election happened, if you asked a majority of the Canadian electorate, what they thought Carney was going to do vis-a-vis the United States, I think they would have said, well, he's going to stand up to Donald Trump. He's going to, disentangle Canada economically and diplomatically and so on from the United States. And I mean, on election night, Carney he sounded pretty unequivocal about this. He said in his election night address that America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. President Trump is trying to break us so America can own us. Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. We have to look out for ourselves. And above all, we have to take care of each other. So, Carney got elected amid this kind of groundswell of civic nationalism that has been, I think is pretty unprecedented in Canada. I mean, the closest analogy in my lifetime, or the closest analog, has probably been around the time of the Iraq War, when Canada stayed out of that. But it's really far exceeded that, what we saw in 2025, which makes sense because Donald Trump, was talking pretty openly in his kind of kidding, not kidding sort of way about making Canada the 51st state. But I think that, since Carney, made the declaration I just read you, he's really, I mean, the talking tough, I think, basically stopped once the election was over. And since then, I think the pattern has really been, much more in the domain of pretty shameless efforts at cajolery. So, the Carney government has, made a number of moves, both when it, you alluded to Iran and its lack of criticism over that, Derek, but in domestic policy as well. Carney introduced border legislation, quite repressive border legislation that was widely criticized by civil liberties groups in a bid to, because one of the pretexts, the two of you may recall, for the trade war with Canada was that it was both, we're getting screwed by other countries who've given us this trade deficit and we're going to make them pay, but it was also people are bringing in fentanyl from Canada into the United States, and so we have to secure the border. And so one of the demands the administration made was for draconian border legislation, which the Carney government introduced. Amid the backlash, that legislation, it's still before Parliament, actually hasn't passed yet. And it may, if it does, it may not be as bad as it initially looked like it would be. But the government also repealed something called the digital services tax, or on the verge of introducing it. They said they wouldn't introduce it, essentially a tax on U.S. tech companies operating in Canada, which, as you know, are a major Trump constituency. Carney's mused about participating in the Golden Dome initiative. Actually, recently sent a representative to the Trump administration's tackling left extremism conference, a pretty sinister affair. They invited Kevin Roberts, who's the president of the Heritage Foundation, one of the architects of Project 2025. They invited him to address cabinet. When there was a backlash, there was very suddenly a scheduling conflict, and he couldn't come. But and I could rattle off plenty more. But essentially, you get the crux of it. I mean, essentially, I think Carney has been pretty shameless in his bid to court Trump and kind of get Trump on side. And I think that's all with a view to getting some kind of a deal that he was then going to be able to sell to the Canadian people as, evidence that he's a master deal maker and so on. In terms of, that it always seemed to me that, putting aside the substance of whatever deal Carney wanted to negotiate, which somebody like me would not have approved of, I'm sure, it always seemed to me quite foolish to assume you were ever going to be able to cut some kind of a deal with Trump, because if you signal to Donald Trump in really any context that you're willing to make concessions to him, he's not going to stop making demands. He's just going to make more of them. So it feels like we've taken 18 months to end up back where we were in about February or March of 2025 and just back where it all started.
Does anybody read The Art of the Deal, or look at follow this man's career at all, and what he does when he gets into negotiations, which is try to extract as many concessions as he can and then stiff you on the other end anyway, and whatever agreement you get isn't worth the paper it's printed on. It's just I don't know why people haven't figured this out yet. It's his whole career. It's not just his president. He's been doing this his whole life.
Derek, can I actually maybe if I have a broader question, actually. So if it's directly related to this, you want to ask, and then I could ask a broader one.
Well, I mean, I have other questions about the negotiations, but I mean, it's fine. We've got
but let's take a little macro take, and then we could return to it. So Luke, what do you take now that we're a few months on from the speech that Derek referenced, where Carney said some nonsense about middle powers, but they immediately lined up behind Iran and they were going to accept this if Trump didn't even step on his own dick? So what do you take about that? What's Canada's geopolitical position now? It's basically been lapdog is too strong, but it's basically been tied, let's say, to the United States. And sure, it bows out, but basically it's one of the largest trading partners and has to essentially follow, broadly speaking, American geostrategy. But where do you see this?
I mean, I would add to that, all lined up behind the Iran war, and then got Trump's fury about it anyway. It didn't even do anybody any good to line up behind the Iran war, because he still got pissed at them because they didn't send their ships in to be blown up in the Strait of Hormuz to bail him out of that mess that he made. So it doesn't even work. Kowtowing to this man is a destined to be a failure in every way.
Yeah, and just, on that point specifically, Carney's endorsement of the U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran was quite bizarre, just as a piece of political communications. It was kind of uncharacteristically undisciplined, I think, for Carney, who is in some ways quite a canny politician, and I think quite a rhetorically conscious one as well. But he the very first day when the school was bombed, he came out and was very unequivocal in his endorsement. And over the next 3 or 4 days, there were 3 or 4 separate positions, little bits of rhetorical triangulation here and there. I think he worked himself into a position once polling indicated there was strong opposition to the war among the Canadian public. He worked himself into a position that was something like, well, I supported the war with regrets, or something like that. So not doing himself any favors there.
He was against the war before he was for it.
Yeah, exactly. He ended up in a position that was Canada took a position which I think you're right, Derek, was never going to be enough for Donald Trump. Like nothing short of Canada sending like ground troops or F-35s or whatever was gonna make Trump happy. And the position he took with wasn't very effective when it came to responding to or managing public opinion either. Anyway, sorry, we've got a little bit off track there. For Danny, I mean, I think I remember the broad stroke of your question, but do you want to just kind of repeat what? Do you want to?
Yeah,
just
I mean,
repeat?
what's Canada's geopolitics? Like, does Canada have a grand strategy, or is it totally just in reference to what the United States does, which is increasingly important, I would imagine, given the United States's relative decline in power?
Sure. Well, I mean, the question of Canada's relationship to the United States has been, like, in many ways, one of the most salient political questions in Canada, going back to the 19th century, going back to the advent of Canada as a nation state.
1857? Am I remembering that correctly?
1867, only 10
God
years
damn it!
off.
I knew
Very
there was
good.
a seven. Yeah.
But you were close. But yeah, I mean, in by about the 1950s or 60s, when Canada's really ceasing to be, like, both in a legal and political sense, and also kind of in a cultural sense, it's ceasing to be a British colony. Canadian independence, and Canadian economic independence in particular, becomes a very live political question. And there's 2 or 3 pretty consequential decades of debate around that. 1988, there's a federal election that's fought almost exclusively around the issue of free trade, and because the pro-free trade Conservatives won that election, I mean, in many ways, that felt like, until Donald Trump started the trade war, that felt like that had kind of resolved the question. Perhaps Canada, as it did with Iraq, was going to sometimes, it wasn't going to always actively be, it wasn't going to be Britain. It wasn't going to be Britain under Tony Blair. It wasn't going to be America's attack dog. But it was, basically going to integrate itself and sort of make its peace with being incredibly integrated with the United States, both in an economic sense and when it comes to its defense and military strategies and infrastructure, and that kind of thing. Now, one of you referenced the speech Carney made in Davos, and I think in many ways that speech is kind of the key to unlocking, what Carney is really trying to do here. I wrote at the time, the week he gave the speech, that I thought people were misinterpreting it quite profoundly. I think people were quite dazzled by the passage everyone was quoting, right, where he was talking about the story of the international rules-based order and how it was partly false. And then, he had that line quoting or referencing a Soviet dissident or something of that kind. I can't remember who it was, about, we placed the sign in the window and we performed the rituals, but all of that's over. I think people, I think, again, as I said, Carney is a very rhetorically conscious politician. I think he knew what he was doing when he said that, and he knew that it would be interpreted as, a grand sweeping statement of defiance of the United States, and like a declaration that the end of neoliberalism and the neoliberal international order was nigh. People paid a lot less attention, I think, to the more prescriptive side of the speech, because when Carney turned to how his government was already actualizing this this new kind of geopolitical orientation, he started talking about his own government's domestic agenda and its trade agenda. He talked about the deals that the trade deals he struck with, Qatar, and I believe the UAE came up as well. I talked about the spike in military expenditure, which is going to be, it's absolutely unprecedented in Canadian history for a government to be spending. The plan is 5% of GDP by 2030, which is, somewhere, I think, above upwards of $500 billion. For a country of Canada's size, it's a tremendous amount to spend on the military. He talked about the government's rolling, didn't put it this way, of course, but the government's rolling back of environmental safeguards and its efforts to build pipelines, and its streamlining of the public service, so it's massive public sector cuts and subsidies for AI, and I mean, essentially this quite right leaning domestic agenda that the Carney government has been implementing, and to me, the apparent dissonance between what Carney said in the beginning of the speech and the agenda that I just alluded to there, like the dissonance is sort of the key to understanding Carneyism to me, because what people took from the first part of the speech, I think, was that Carney was saying that the old order's dead. Like, we all know that it's nonsense. But I think too many people assumed that in saying that he was positing some kind of progressive alternative to it. And whereas I think what he was actually saying was, like, liberal internationalism is dead, so we no longer have to go through the liturgy, like the empty performances around international institutions and human rights and that kind of thing. I mean, there were some perfunctory references to those in the speech, but he was saying we don't really have to worry about that kind of thing too much anymore. And so, when it comes to the United States, I mean, I think Carney has he is trying to diversify Canada's trade relationships in certain respects and that kind of thing, but there hasn't really been any attempt to really break from the United States in any significant way. I mean, as I said, like, much of the past year has been spent by Canada quite enthusiastically endorsing a lot of Trump's conduct in the world, or being silent about like horrendous and atrocious things the Trump administration is doing. So I think for Carney, it all comes down to he wants to get as much of this domestic agenda passed as he can. That's the priority. And I don't really think that substantially reconfiguring Canada's relationship with the United States was ever going to be in the cards with somebody like Mark Carney. So there's a lot to unpack there. So feel free to probe me some more.
What is the domestic agenda going to be vis-a-vis the United States? No, I mean, I only mean say vis-a-vis the United States because they're such close trading partners. So Carney was Bank of England, right? Am I remembering this correctly? He was the head of the Bank of England, and so he's like obviously this neoliberal. So what is this possibly going to be?
I mean, it's I would just tack on to the domestic agenda. It would seem to me has to change quite a bit if you're now in a trade war with the United States. If you've got $20 billion in U.S. goods that you're tariffing, and they're doing the same to $20 billion in Canadian exports, the USMCA renegotiation is probably dead at this point. I mean, unless there's a revival of unless this incident can be put to bed and people can get back to the negotiating table. So that must change things considerably. Like, what is the plan for adjusting to this, I guess?
Well, right now, I mean, like I said earlier, it feels like we're back to about, February or March of 2025. And at that time, Canada was responding to the tariffs with its own round of counter tariffs. That's where we're at. I think really, there's no question that there's going to be, there's going to be counter tariffs from Canada. I think it's really a question of, like, on what scale is Canada willing to respond, and I'm not so sure. In 2025, there were a number of things that were pretty consequential, like the government of Ontario, where I live, which is Canada's largest project, threatened to cancel, and I believe don't quote me on it, I believe in the end did cancel like a multi-billion-dollar contract with Starlink. The United States is very dependent on Canada for its oil, and I mean, obviously, like, if Canada wanted to get really tough here, it could simply, like, turn off the faucets. They would need a plan to then, like, handle the domestic side of that.
I mean, it could cut electricity, right? There are northern states that get electricity from Canada. Like,
that's right. A lot of upstate New York in particular is dependent on, and I believe it's hydroelectricity generated in Ontario, and that was on the table just over a year ago, the threat to potentially cut that off. So, I mean, Canada's a small country, but it is a very resource-rich country, and the United States is very dependent on it for imports, for Canadian exports rather, and Canada conversely is very dependent on America buying its goods. So
Right.
it is a bit of a it is a bit of a dilemma. I mean, it's possible that in the next few months, the goal will simply be to kind of maintain a holding pattern until the midterms. I mean, the Trump tariffs are not popular. And Trump himself, I think, is now less popular than George Bush was before he left office, which I didn't think that would be possible. So, I mean, it may be the hope is now to Trump.
Your lack of faith in Donald Trump is disturbing here, Luke. I mean, come on.
You're right. I mean, yeah, what am I saying? I always knew he could do it. But if anybody could do it, it would be him. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Trump also has obviously hit some obstacles when it comes to the implementation of the tariffs, judicial obstacles because of the Supreme Court, although now it seems that they're finding, kind of roundabout ways to reintroduce them in piecemeal and that kind of thing. And now there's, another kind of facet of the trade war in 2025 was the symbolic war. So Trump had an executive order earlier today to rename Lake Ontario, which I can actually see when I look out the window here. He has actually, I think, officially renamed it the Lake America or something. So we're back to that kind of shit. Yeah, what happens the next kind of few weeks? I'm not sure. I mean, I would assume I would make an educated guess that if you're Canadian, if you're a Carney government negotiator at this point, what you're hoping for is Trump becomes a lame duck president, and then at some point you can negotiate a deal that's also bad for Canada, but which you can declare victory with somebody saner or with a weakened version of the Trump administration or something like that. I mean, either way, it's clear they're not going to get a deal.
So
in the short
basically,
term.
just the same thing that these guys all did.
Yep.
After the first Trump administration, just wait him out and don't acknowledge that there's anything structurally wrong with your relationship with the United States, or that there's a real danger that the movement is going to gain power again and do something even worse. Just wait him out, and then when we elect a nice normal guy like Joe Biden, you can say, hey, everything's back to normal now, everything's great, no reason to worry, no reason to be retrospective about this or reflective on it. Let's just pretend that never happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really is more or less the goal. I mean, there was a brief moment at the beginning of 2025 because of how extreme Trump's rhetoric was and because of what the public reaction was in Canada. There was a brief moment where I did think that Canada was going to substantially renegotiate its reconfigure its relationship with the United States. I mean, people with my politics have never been fans of free trade. And if Trump was going to, I'm not an accelerationist, but if Trump was going to, what Trump did at the beginning of last year was essentially vindicate every criticism of free trade that people made back in 1988. I mean, what people said at the time was, if we have a so-called free trade deal with the United States, we're essentially signing away our economic sovereignty. The United States is a much bigger and more powerful country than we are, and if we complete this process of total economic integration with the United States, they're going to have a gun to our head, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, it took 30, 40 years and a maniac like Donald Trump in order to do it, but that's where we're at. I mean, I think to a certain extent, a country like Canada can't really have a free trade deal with the United States because they're just so disproportionate in size. And so I had briefly thought that there was a chance to not negotiate a new free trade deal, but negotiate an entirely new arrangement between Canada and the United States when it came to our trade and other relationships. But yeah, I mean, it does feel like what our political class has been reaching for here over the past 18 years is just, past 18 months, excuse me, is more like just a rebranded version of the status quo. And I suspect that that's what they're now waiting. That's what they want to now wait Trump out in order to achieve.
Luke, our children, our future.
Is there any other answer to this than yes? Isn't it true by definition?
You tell me.
I mean, I heard the discussion you guys had of the Odyssey, and I think that was very much the message of that film, wasn't it?
Children
It was like we fucked up, but we're gonna leave young Telemachus to deal with the sea people.
Okay,
see ya, we're going west.
Just stake this out right now. I did not drop the first F-bomb of this live stream. It was Luke who did
I think
that.
I dropped one like 5 seconds into it. I'm
maybe you did. Yeah,
tired of Canada.
This is silly, and I would say it's the dumbest aspect of this. But you already mentioned the dumbest aspect of this, which is renaming Lake Ontario Lake America. Like, just what can you even say at this point? But what do you make of this like French language stuff? Do you think they were just like, do you think this is a serious bug up somebody's ass in the Trump administration, like that we're really irritated about the French language, or is this just like flexing on Canada? Like, let's see what we can get these guys to go along with.
I mean, I'd really like to see more details of what the demands were, because yeah, it is very perplexing that even the Trump administration would decide to make that like they were willing to like have that be one of the things that like torpedoed a deal. I mean, there's obviously a universe here where they could have gotten a bad deal and Trump could have declared victory on the deal that they almost had, and he would have had more justification for doing so than Carney would have done. But yeah, I mean, that your speculation about that, Derek, is probably the best I can come up with. I mean, it just kind of feels like a flex. It's retrograde to have like French language, packaging and signage and like. I mean, so let's get rid of it. That I don't know, but that doesn't feel like bad speculation to me. And it also, and if they had been trying to insert a poison pill, to make into the negotiations to make sure there'd be no deal, you would do something like that, because there's no Canadian government, whoever the prime minister was or whoever the whatever the party was, would ever agree to anything like that. Like not if they ever want to win another seat in Quebec, and it's pretty hard to form a government in Canada without quite a few of those. So,
right, and I will note, like Jamieson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, is now telling reporters, like, well, we weren't like really pushing that. We don't know why that would have made the Canadians so angry. Like, it wasn't a deal breaker for us. So I just don't like, what was the point of even including it? It's baffling to me. And I think really there is just like a, how hard can we dunk on these nerds? Like, let's just see what we can do.
Well, as everyone here knows, we worship nothing more than the almighty loony. So, Luke, we've gotten a couple of super chats. First, friend of the pod, Tom Strand, asks, any recent developments in Canada-China relations? I believe Carney visited Beijing in January. Did anything come of this?
Yeah, I mean, they negotiated a trade deal of a trade agreement of some kind. Forgive me, I'm forgetting the details. I mean, China was part of a multi-country tour that Carney did. At some point earlier this year, he went to India as well. I mean, trade diversification has been a big part of the Carney agenda. A lot of it has to do with critical minerals. A lot of it also has to do with weapons, because it's pretty hard to spend $500 billion on military arms procurement in just a few years if you don't have lots of different places you're buying it from. I don't believe that was part of negotiations with China. There was some stuff around electric vehicles. I believe there was some pretty small ball. I mean, not small ball stuff. I suppose if you're an affected party, small ball stuff in the kind of scale of international trade. Some stuff around was it oysters in Canada's East Coast and some of the trade rules around that kind of stuff. I don't think it was hugely consequential in terms of scale. I mean, possibly symbolic that the Prime Minister of Canada is going to Beijing and having these negotiations at all. But unless I've missed something, I think you still can't get. I believe the 100% tariffs on those incredible Chinese electric cars are still in place.
We've got someone who paid 2.5 toonies to let us know. I'm a Canadian ecology PhD candidate, and a lot of the conversations you guys have about what the history profession are very familiar. Sorry, my emphasis was off there. About what the history profession are very familiar to what biologists say. I agree. So Luke,
biology, well, yes, biology is as dead as history is, I guess.
what do you think of the movie Canadian Bacon? Good, bad, great?
I loved that movie as a kid. I've seen it making the rounds again. There's a really funny Michael Moore cameo in that movie. He actually, I think, directed that movie.
I think he did. He's the
not a well-known fact.
Directed, yeah.
There is an absolutely maddening scene towards the end of it when Bud Boomer, the played by the late great John Candy, and his compatriots, like there's the whole gag at the end where they go to like invade Canada, and they go to the capital, which for them they're like, oh, it's Toronto, and when the Mountie tells them no, it's Ottawa, they just laugh and they go to Toronto. And there's an absolutely maddening shot where they're standing and they're looking at the Toronto skyline, and one of them says, it's the most beautiful city I've ever seen. It's like Albany. And I still don't really get that joke, but the point is the shot is like an impossible shot. Like they've driven to Toronto and they're standing on this, like the only place the shot could have been taken from is this like spit that goes out in the Toronto harbor. It's a lovely place to have a walk, but it's a great shot of Toronto. It's just completely unrealistic. So I have to take
Luke,
Canadian Bacon to task for that.
Well, before we get to the $1.99 question, yes. Did you know that where Fraser lives, the view is literally impossible?
Is that right?
That is right.
That's intense.
That is literally impossible view to have.
This is like we've stumbled into that realm of facts. Like I feel like I started it where this is like the that apartment in Friends. How would they possibly afford that on that?
How would they afford that?
How did anybody afford? Luke. Yeah, the
70s New York rent control, I think, is the answer
Seriously.
there.
Well, right, because they got it from their grandparents, right? So were they illegally renting that apartment the entire time?
I think that's a plot detail on that. Question. Anyway, I didn't know the phrase.
Also, both on Friends and Sex and the City, more of them would be Jewish. Let's be honest here. Also, they literally have Jewish names like Rachel Green. Come on.
And Ross and Monica are Jewish, right?
Well, they're half Jewish, which is ridiculous. Okay. Look at those parents; they're full Jewish. Let's be honest here. All right, there was the question there.
On the subject of, we can get to the question in a second. On the subject of Canadian movies, Strange Brew. Great Canadian movie or greatest Canadian movie of all time?
I'm embarrassed to say it doesn't ring a bell. What is Strange Brew?
Oh my God, the Mackenzie brothers. This is from like the 1980s.
Derek's making an SCTV reference.
I know. Yeah, I know the Mackenzie brothers.
No, I watched it as a kid. Like my dad loved that movie. Oh, it's.
I haven't seen it. I know. Yeah, I know.
It would be. I've talked about this. Someone should do a podcast series on Toronto comedy in the 70s. That I think that's like worthy of a podcast series. Yeah, Luke, you could do it as a Canadian.
All right,
as a Canadian, I know I'm an expert about everything that's ever happened.
Rachel was not canonically Jewish. What is Weejak Poo Pong McPlop? Is that your Christian name? What is he referring to? Weejak, come on.
Get real. I want proof. Danny, you want to read out our
Derek, could you do it?
$1.99 question? Okay, all right. This is from Real Sebastian Gorka. I hope it is really Sebastian Gorka.
He shouldn't be posting on this. He's in the.
I have two questions for Luke. Is there any discussion about a Canadian response to something extreme like a violation of sovereignty? So yeah, like the U.S. does something even more maniacal. Is there any discussion of that in Canada? What would ensue from that?
Well, I believe there was some reporting a little while ago to the effect that the Canadian government was doing sort of like clandestine war games exercises around like what they would do in the event of an American invasion. I'm not really sure how seriously to take that. I mean, it should be said that the massive military spending program, the kind of military Keynesian program that the Carney government has introduced is I've been trying to get people angry about it for over a year now. It must be said without much success. Like it doesn't really seem like a very live question in the country. And I think that's because a lot of people probably assume it's like we're arming ourselves to protect us from from the United States, which if that were actually true, I don't think we'd be buying so many fine armaments from the likes of Boeing and Lockheed Martin. But I think that's how a lot of people understand it.
And the
Do you
second
think
part of the question
Canadian?
was,
Oh, sorry, Derek. I have a more.
there's a part 2 of the question. Okay, we got a paying customer though. I think we should honor that.
Pay
and
$2.
finish
Okay, I'll pay.
yeah.
I'll Venmo you each $2 after this.
Okay.
Do you think Canada would have been better off if the United States took it over during the Revolutionary War?
No.
Or the War of 1812.
Well, they made it to Quebec City,
chance.
right?
They had a second chance in the War of 1812.
And there's a very insulting monument in Quebec City to like defending it against the Americans. So I don't know.
In fact, just yesterday, I was at Queenston Heights on the Niagara Peninsula, which is the site of a battle of the same name in, I believe, 1812. Both General Isaac Brock, the British commander, and the young lawyer from Toronto, who raised the standard and charged up the hill. They were both killed, but the battle was won. And not a big fan of the British Empire, but generally speaking, I'm happy that I haven't ended up an American.
Interesting choice, Derek. I actually have to go and put my child, who you see running around, to sleep. But I think you guys should continue.
Okay.
Should continue this.
Get through the
continue.
Children are our future.
Well, I don't know, Luke.
That's what I hear.
Hey, Leo, you want to say hi?
Hi, Leo.
Hey,
all right.
Leo.
Bye, everybody. For
See you,
everyone who did super chat, you just know you're taking food out of Leo's mouth. Bye.
Okay. All right, let's get rid of him. Okay. The second half of Sebastian Gorka's question was, should I learn Chinese? Because the Chinese century is coming. And my response to that is, I don't know if you should do it because the Chinese century is coming, because everybody is going to speak English anyway, even though China will be the dominant power in the world. English is so ubiquitous at this point.
I think you should. I think you should
like
do it.
To learn Chinese.
You should do it so that you can read Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
That's a good reason.
Yeah.
Or just for the love of learning. Like, if you can do it and you're good at languages, why not learn Chinese? I spent 10 years of my life trying to learn Arabic, Persian, and Turkish, and I didn't learn any of them. So I can't speak to that, because it is a constant uphill battle for me with languages. But if you're good at it, why not? So we got another question, Luke. This is for you. Is the Canadian housing situation worse than here? This is from Donbass Boomhauer. Looked at jobs at Stat Canada, and I would have needed to be the equivalent of a branch chief there to make my starting salary here, which I guess is relevant, certainly, in terms of how much it costs to get a house.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say if it's better or worse, because I'm not familiar enough with the nitty gritty of the U.S. housing situation. Of course, it obviously varies depending on where you are in either country. I will say it's very bad, and it's bad for a lot of the same reasons that the American housing situation is bad. There's been an assetization of housing. There are a lot of apartments in major cities that are sitting empty because no one can afford them, or because the people who own them are just using them to park money, essentially, or waiting for their value to appreciate before selling them off. I mean, the housing was actually just incidentally a major plank of the Carney government's election platform. They had these very effective ads with kind of montages of troops coming home from the Second World War on troop ships and post-war housing construction, which there was a lot of in Canada. We had the National Housing Program, and they were always kind of cagey on what they were actually going to do. And turns out the ads were good, but they haven't really done a whole lot. So the housing situation is pretty bad. Whether it's worse than the United States generally, I don't feel qualified enough to say, but they're both pretty bad.
Somebody mentioned Doug Ford, and I do have to ask you this. Like, is Doug Ford going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada? Like, what does it say that Carney as Prime Minister has, tried to stake out, rhetorically at least, this, kind of hard-headed, realistic position on the U.S., but it's Ford who's actually the guy who's like, nail these guys. Like, don't let the U.S. walk all over us. Like, we should be cutting electricity. We should be cutting. Like, he's the one who's taken out the real nationalist, staked out the real nationalist position here. Like, what is that going to do for him politically? Do you think?
Well, the two of them have actually, I mean, they've really formed quite a bond. I mean, Doug Ford seems a
But
lot
Ford is, I mean,
closer.
they're opposing parties, right? I mean, they're from.
They are opposing parties,
Okay.
although I mean, just they've been very aligned since Carney entered office, and Doug Ford. I mean, so the like the Canadian parties, right? People think there's like, liberal, conservative, NDP, and then in Quebec there's the Bloc Québécois. The NDP is the only party that's the same thing everywhere. So if you join the federal NDP, like I am a member through the Ontario NDP, but that's not true of the Conservatives or the Liberals. And right now, I mean, there's a lot of overlap. Like historically, people who've been Conservatives in Ontario are Conservatives federally, not always, but Doug Ford has actually been feuding. He and a lot of his kind of senior staff have been feuding with Pierre Poilievre, who's the leader of the federal Conservative Party. So in that sense, it kind of makes sense that he's been playing footsies with Carney. Carney and Ford have very different styles, obviously, right? Carney is very buttoned up, and Ford is much more prone to kind of theatrics. Like Carney is a classic technocrat. Ford, tries to do this kind of blue collar thing much more. I think, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if a certain amount of what the two of them are doing is kind of coordinated. I think both of them
Good comp,
understand
bad comp.
yeah, exactly. And I think both of them understand the value of nationalist appeals of one kind or another. And perhaps you make those differently to different demographics, different electoral constituencies. I mean, with Doug Ford, it's interesting because he's actually, his approval ratings have been like cavernously low, and his government has been embroiled in just like worsening scandals. There've been a whole suite of expensive scandals recently. He took a significant dip because it was revealed, I believe it was the Toronto Star reported that Doug Ford's government had spent nearly $30 million to essentially buy him a private jet so he could fly around to all his like fancy meetings and stuff. So they took a hit over that. They've since returned the jet amid a backlash. But yeah, Ford is a strange creature politically because he's been premier now of Ontario, Canada's largest province, since 2018. And I think with just a few exceptions, his own approval ratings have been quite low. He's just been able to maintain power. During elections, they kind of keep him out of the spotlight, and then at key moments, he's able to kind of step in with these theatrics, like. I'm sure Americans were seeing a lot of him in early 2025 when he was like dumping American booze out on like the floor of a factory. And he had that hat that said Canada is not for sale. He's just like his late brother, Rob, and in some ways like more so. He's a lot less chaotic than Rob Ford was, who was mayor of Toronto, where I live. But like the one thing the Fords have always been good at is sort of political theater. And Trump, I think, really threw Doug Ford a bone with, like starting the trade war again. Doug Ford's PCs had been trailing in the polls, and I believe there was a poll today that had them back out in the lead. So we'll see if that lasts.
Where do things stand? Like there was a moment there, like maybe a few months back, maybe it was last year, but where there really seemed to be some flirtation between, if not the Trump administration on an official basis, sort of the wider MAGA movement and the Albertan separatist movement or independence movement. What do you make of that? And I would imagine that recent events maybe have cooled any whatever ardor there was for Albertan independence, and like aligning with the Trump movement may have cooled off given things that have happened since then. But yeah, what do you sort of make of where that stands?
Yeah, so I mean, it should be said that the actual number of people in Alberta who would like in a referendum would vote to leave Canada, let alone join the United
Probably
States, is
huge. Who wouldn't want to be part of the United States?
It's incredibly small, but in Canada, particularly when it comes to when it comes to Quebec, right? Quebec has had two referendums where ostensibly these were referendums on is Canada, is Quebec going to remain within the federation or not? And when you looked at the fine print in either of those referendums, it's actually not always been exactly clear what a yes vote even would have entailed. And constitutionally, a province does not. This has now been established by the Canadian Supreme Court since the last Quebec referendum. No province has the right to unilaterally secede. So even if there was a referendum and 50 plus one of Albertans voted in favor, which would never happen, a province can't unilaterally secede. That just can't happen. I mean, the issue of kind of Alberta sovereigntism and the playing footsies with Donald Trump and MAGA. I mean, that's a little more easier to explain. I mean, Alberta has historically been the most right-wing province. It had uninterrupted right-wing governance from, I believe, the late 1920s until 2015, and the only interlude was 5 years of NDP government in Alberta after 2015, and the right has been back in power since then. The right in Alberta has also, I think, particularly since the 1980s, had a lot more direct American influence than the right in the rest of the country. I mean, if you go back to, I guess it's the 19th century, parts of southern Alberta were actually settled by Americans because land ran out in the west, and so they just moved north of the border. So, that might. That settlement might have something to do with it as well. I mean, the referendum that ostensibly Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, wants to have is probably best understood as it's not a perfect analogy, but kind of like what David Cameron was trying to do with Brexit, right? Like when Cameron introduced the Brexit vote, he didn't want there to be a yes vote. He thought that he could just outflank UKIP and the forces to his right, and of course it backfired spectacularly. And Smith is very right-wing herself. I wouldn't say she's trying to exactly outflank forces to her right, but she's certainly trying to respond to them and be receptive to them. And the most premiers of Alberta for the past, several decades, it feels like, have been essentially taken down by internal coups because the party didn't think they were right-wing enough. So, Smith probably has that on her mind as well. The whole Alberta separatism thing is like a big joke, and it's incredibly annoying to think about and talk about. But there we are. Right. I think that referendum will probably go ahead, and I think it'll probably get like single digits in favor, or maybe slightly higher. But
the other thing that we probably should have talked about that we haven't talked about yet is the infamous Gordie Howe Bridge, which is was supposed to alleviate, share the load in terms of traffic crossing between Detroit and Windsor. Alleviate some pressure on the one bridge that had been there already. Built, I think, entirely by the Canadian side, and yet Carney agreed to split the toll revenues from the bridge with the United States because, again, he was bending over backwards to kowtow to Trump, buying himself no goodwill at all or anything tangible. How's that been discussed, that arrangement?
Yeah, Carney definitely took a hit in the immediate aftermath of because he made all these concessions, which then I'm forgetting exactly where things have left off with that, but Canada had the bridge ceremony by itself. The United States didn't participate, and the concessions Canada made weren't enough to placate Donald Trump anyway. So Carney appeared to change his story a few times in press conferences, and he got into some trouble over that. But the Gordie Howe Bridge situation feels like a microcosm for what this entire dynamic has been throughout these negotiations. Carney has gotten a lot of credit from the media. He's gotten a lot of credit from much of the public in general for how he's been dealing with Donald Trump, and a lot of people, I think, are under the impression that he's really kind of standing up and being tough with Donald Trump, and like he isn't really. I mean, this was a bridge that, as you said, Derek, like Canada financed it. It took 8 years to complete, and at the last second, Trump said we want a share of the tolls, and Carney appears to have said, yeah, we're going to be we're going to be open to that. And he made a bunch of concessions that were, I think it's still it's still unclear, I think, exactly what he offered Trump, but and then even that wasn't enough, and that's just a microcosm for the whole for the whole attempt to get a deal with Donald Trump in general, I think. But I mean, nobody should take from anything I'm saying, either in response to that question or anything I've said throughout the discussion. Nobody should get the impression that Carney is paying a political cost for what he's doing. I mean, at least he hasn't so far. There have been signs of modest signs anyway of the NDP, which had a really tough election. Its toughest election for the for parliamentary social democracy in Canada since it was created in the 1930s last year. And there's been signs of a modest recovery in the polls, perhaps suggesting a bit of buyer's remorse from some people who voted Liberal in 2025. But Carney's personal approval ratings are quite high. The Liberals are in the at least the low 40s in the polls, which would be enough to probably win bigger than they won last time if there were an election tomorrow. Before when I was preparing to come on, I did a survey of kind of the Canadian media over the past few days since the negotiators walked away from the table. And I mean, there are a few honorable exceptions, but I think broadly speaking, much of the pundit class is wetting itself and talking about the important critical act of defiance and how tough. And so Carney's has not paid a political cost for either his right-wing domestic agenda or the way he's dealt with Donald Trump to date. And that's important to register too, as much as it might frustrate someone like me.
Well, it feels like a combination of the Trump effect, just the idea that he's, can be seen standing up to Trump, and Trump is so unpopular that it gives him a shine. But compared to Polyev, like who is a sycophant, I mean, got tarred with it a while back, like just being a MAGA sycophant. Under these circumstances, like the comparison there, I would imagine does a lot for Carney in the sort of negative polarization sense, leaving aside anything that he's actually doing.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, the irony is that Carney is in many ways, I mean, he's one of the reasons the Conservatives are struggling in the polls. Poilievre is unpopular and he's off-putting to a lot of people. But I think one of the big reasons that the Conservatives are struggling is because the Liberals essentially stole their agenda and are now implementing it, in many ways, taking it further than they would have. But as U.S. politics have long been a testament to, politics play.
We're all one people after all. The Liberal Party doing what the Conservative Party wants, but more and better.
Yeah, and I mean that's true. And I mean, yeah, what I was going to say as well is, I mean, I think that people relate to politics in different ways, and they're conducted on kind of different planes simultaneously. There's a substantive ideological level that politics play out on, and then there's also a kind of affective level. And in that sense, lots of people, when they see Carney on TV, they do think, oh, I'm really happy he's the guy I'm seeing on TV and not Pierre Poilievre, because Pierre Poilievre is like one of those bad, American politicians that I don't like. And they're not really too cognizant of the fact that Carney is implementing much of the Conservative Party's 2025 election platform, right? It's very similar to the overvaluing of certain empty gestures by Democratic senators, or Adam Schiff during Trump's first term, or whatever, people who become resistance heroes. What was the Cory Booker speech when he did that filibuster, and then he just voted for the thing anyway, right?
For nothing.
Exactly. So name of the paper. So that happens in Canada too, and we've seen it happening a lot vis-a-vis Canada and Trump.
Fantastic. I think that's probably a good place to leave it, unless there's any last minute questions, but I don't think there are. Luke, we are always happy to have you on the program to be our Canada desk. So thank you for doing that again, and thanks to everybody for checking out the live stream. We'll be back next week, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, on if I don't screw up the technology on all of these platforms. So thanks everybody, and thanks Luke.
Thanks, Derek. Before we go, can I ask, will this be like, are you guys posting this on Substack?
Yeah,
like,
it should be up on
to...
Substack. It'll be on YouTube. It's on YouTube, so it'll automatically be the replay will be available on YouTube. It should be available on Substack as well.
Okay, well, feel free to tag me on Substack if that's something you can do, or like the double byline or
we'll
whatever.
Definitely, yeah.
Sorry, folks,
We'll
breaking the fourth wall here with some technical talk, but always a pleasure, Derek. Yeah, talk again soon, I hope. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.